So now that we've talked a little bit about joking behavior, I think we can look back at those stories and ask not whether or not it's funny or why it would be funny, since again, humor is very, very subjective to the culture, but instead ask ourselves maybe whether or not you find it funny, what are some values that are being reinforced? So for example, with the song from the reading, I was filled with confusion when a white man asked me a question. It turned out to be because of Kinnimack. He's sort of reinforcing that you should give clear directions. Kinnimack could have caused a disaster. He's teasing him, and it's not meant to be taken too seriously. But nonetheless, there's a lesson there. Song number 2 was the one where they were talking about the guy who went on to that old show, This Is Your Life, right, to meet a minister that he knew, a friend of his. So this Inuit man was flown down to California to be on TV, and one of his friends had reminded him to kind of like, don't be super pretentious about it. And when he came back, he made a song for him. On the television way over there in California, it turned out to be Mayak. I thought so. I want to shake his hand. Sort of like complimenting Mayak, like, hey man, you're a big guy now. And he performed himself well and didn't act like a jerk when he was on TV, didn't act pretentious about it when he came back to the community. And they're sort of complimenting him, like, hey, that's cool that you were on TV. You're a big celebrity now. And then song number 3. So again, the value there would kind of be humility, right? And composing yourself properly, but also celebrating in each other's joys. And then number 3, this was the story about the kind of friendly bickering that was going on between a couple of people about when they were hanging out in a home that one of them had 2 families, and it was too cold, and one of them was complaining, and then another person was complaining about rocks, and the other one was like, well, why didn't you wear your snowshoes? Inside the wind, Tilana again has acquired a piece of land inside the wind. Poor little Yamani wouldn't put her snowshoes on inside the wind. And so there's kind of some mocking there going on about the fact that somebody was complaining about the weather, which you can't change the weather, and also that somebody wasn't prepared for the environmental conditions. So it's sort of reinforcing, like, don't complain about nature, right? It's not nature's fault. You were the one that wasn't prepared and or are choosing to complain about weather. All right, well, that's most of what I wanted to say about, oh man, the slide that I wanted to show you has gotten deleted. So hold on a second. Okay, so I've got the slide figured out. By the way, the book, that reading, which I thought was really cool and really funny and fun, talked about how they're teasing cousins, and they drew a distinction between parallel and cross cousins, which, unless you're super into kinship anthropology, might have been a little bit confusing to you, or if you come from a culture that does parallel and cross cousins, which some of you may be. So if you're not from one of those cultures and are not an anthropologist, let me explain what a parallel versus a cross cousin is. So in most American subcultures, we don't do parallel and cross cousins. We do in some American subcultures, such, for example, if your family might be immigrants from South Asia, or if you are, for example, in Yupiak. So cross and parallel cousins is something that's distinguished in some languages and not in others. The idea here is a parallel cousin is a cousin who you're related to through your father's brother or your mother's sister. So you're related to that cousin through the same gendered sibling of your parent. Does that make sense? So again, your uncle, your paternal uncle, or your maternal aunt, those kids would be your parallel cousins. By contrast, your cross cousins are the ones where it crosses gender, in the sense that it's your paternal uncle or it's your paternal aunt or your maternal uncle. It's the sister of your father, her kids, or it's the brother of your mom, their kids. Those are called cross cousins. So in some kinship systems, such as in South Asia, such as among Inupiaq, many other cultures as well, you have a distinction between cross and parallel cousins. 2 different categories of cousins, and sometimes several Middle Eastern cultures as well. So sometimes that has actually really dramatic ramifications. So for example, within certain parts of the Middle East, parallel cousin marriage is encouraged, whereas cross cousin marriage is not. In some parts of South Asia, cross cousin marriage is encouraged, whereas parallel cousin marriage is not, and that would be considered inappropriate. And within Inupiaq culture, parallel cousins are treated more or less like siblings traditionally, whereas cross cousins is a little bit more of a distant relationship. You're still kin and you're expected to cooperate, but it's also one of those things where it wouldn't be inappropriate. Like if you asked your cross cousin, hey, can I borrow your snowmobile for something? It wouldn't be inappropriate for your cross cousin to be like, well, sure, but I get to borrow your hunting rifle in a week, okay, man? Right? It's okay to razz them a little bit and kind of ask for a tit for tat and sort of a bit more of a distant relationship. And there's also sometimes a friendly rivalry, which is why they're called teasing cousins. It's expected within Inupiaq culture traditionally that cross cousins will kind of razz each other every chance they get, tease each other, and that they're kind of friendly rivals, related but friendly rivals. All right, well, with that in mind now, let's jump to another topic.